My own imperfections are not held against me by God, and therefore, who am I to hold imperfections of others against them? Is it possible that our deepest formation happens when life is difficult and not always easy? I think the church has a really powerful way to say, we don't need to agree nor disagree with you necessarily, but we're going to love you regardless. That's one of the greatest ways the church has in our Western culture to stand out.
Hey there, and welcome to the Upside Down People podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. This is a podcast where we have gospel-centered conversations with people who love Jesus. And if you're encouraged by, or inspired by, or just find these conversations helpful in any way, a way you can show your support is by sharing them with your family and friends. And subscribe to our channels on YouTube, on Spotify, or on Apple Podcasts. This really helps get the podcast out there and helps it land in people's laps who would really benefit from it as well as yourself. With that said, I'm really excited to have a conversation today around the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and strength. So let's get into today's conversation. All right, well, welcome to the Upside Down People podcast. I'm your host, Caleb. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I'm joined with a pastor, author, and the founder of Life to the Full. He's recently written a book called Here to Love, Recapturing the Centrality of Jesus' Greatest Command. I'm grateful and honored to have this conversation with Chris Cipollone. How are you going, Chris?
Hey, Caleb. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back, actually. It was fun the first time, so we've got to go again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for people who haven't been following the show since we last spoke, or our new listeners, we had a conversation probably about 12 months ago on your podcast, the Dead Elephants podcast. It was sort of a bit of a collab, and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, I've just enjoyed following your work, and I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation as well. So I'm looking forward to another good one.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you told me it was 12 months, I would have said no way. But looking at your hair, that's a heck of a lot longer than last time we spoke. I'd actually believe it. Those are some luscious golden locks for people who can't see. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I did grow it myself, so I can take full credit for that.
You should.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with you, maybe a good place to start to humanize you a bit, add some flesh to the amazing voice behind the microphone, is share a bit about yourself, where you find yourself today, and some projects that you are currently working on.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Sydney guy, born and bred. That's still where I am. That's where I've done most of my ministry. By way of background, I was a teacher originally. Worked briefly as a journalist, but spent most of my working career as a pastor. And then more recently, you alluded to it in the intros, my working title at the moment is founding director of a new ministry called Life to the Full, which is filling my cup. For the most part, is exhausting my body, but in a good way because it's been a good work. And writing on the side, podcasting on the side, and trying to hold down a family of 6 all at the same time.
Oh my goodness. That seems like, you are definitely living life to the full yourself there. So tell us a bit about then, Life to the Full. I can't remember if we spoke about it on our last conversation. I definitely remember speaking about it offline, when you're still in you're done the formulation stage, you're sort of in the action, let's get this thing going. What's happening with that? What is it about? I know it's about Christian flourishing through a number of different services you offer. But share us the heart behind that and
Yeah, I mean, it's my first book. So we're speaking about my second book today for the most part, but my first book was on the intersection of mental health and faith that came out of my own story of living with depression that culminated in a hospitalization around the end of my Bible college degree, which was like this huge apex of psychology and theology in my own life when everything kind of fell apart. So in God's kindness, that experience of my life started as a journal, which turned into a book, which turned into a speaking ministry. And the message that whole time was that I think if we do psychology and theology well together, that is something that we're missing at the heart of what it means to flourish as an image bearer of God. But over those years, it was really like that was my message, but I didn't really have anywhere to send people in line with what that vision was. And so Life to the Full is really an extension of that message in practice, where we've brought together some amazing psychologists, relationship counselors, a sexologist, pastoral supervisors. I do spiritual direction within it. So it's a holistic service for people who, they don't have to be struggling. I mean, most people have some sort of presentation where life is hard, but it can be about optimistic envisioning of coaching and what you want your life or ministry to look like. But really I think at its heart, the conviction is that when Jesus says that he's come to give life to the full, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will always be easy, but that we will always have a beautiful union with the Father at all times, like he did. So one of our board members said it really well when he asked, would you say that Jesus had life to the full? And it's like, well, the Sunday school answer is, I have to say yes because he's Jesus, but would I automatically describe him as happy? Like, that probably wouldn't be the first word that I would ascribe to him, but he did have union with the Father, with the exception of that moment on the separation on the cross. So really what we strive to do is see the opportunity in the hardships of life to draw closer to God and not further away. And it doesn't mean that it has to be easy or cruisy, but actually in the challenges that we have psychologists and, as I said, relationship counselors, coaches who can integrate your worldview in with what we have of the best of secular therapy. We're a not-for-profit. It's a beautiful origin story. There was a little church here in Sydney that seeded us a substantial amount of money. So the church was only 30 people asking themselves what the parable of the talents looks like. And that's how we got the money to start this. And we've been open for 6 months, and it's been a wild journey of rapid acceleration and faith testing and all of that goes with really stepping out with something new. But I'm convinced that people are being blessed by it, and that's the main thing.
That's unreal. What have, in the first 6 months, have there been any particular challenges in sort of seeing this unfold?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you'd asked me 2 months ago, I would say that the main challenge was where are the clients coming from?
Right.
Even just in the last 2 months, it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep up with client demand? So the challenge has really been like, what does it look like to step forward in faith with something that doesn't yet exist? And like, I'll confess, and this is honestly not false humility, of the team, I would say I've had the least amount of faith. And maybe that's just because I have to head it up and I'm paying bills and paying salaries. But the team has just been amazing about going, it's going to be okay. This is, you know, God's got us. And not even in the sense of it's going to work, but like, even if it doesn't, hey, we've brought a worthy offering to him and we've given it a crack and we've given our energy and our all. So the challenge is really, it's like you've had all of these doors open up for this thing to happen. And then you physically open doors to this practice and you look at the calendar and you've got like one client in week 1 and you're paying a salary.
Yeah.
And it's like, God, like you made this really easy to this point and now it's really hard right when we need you to come through for us.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like waiting and slowly it builds and you're not quite there and you've got limited seed funding and how long is this going to last? So it's really wrestling with God through that stuff. But in that has been an opportunity where, I guess this is any startup, but particularly in a ministry, I guess a church plant would be the closest parallel. You know, everyone has given something to be here. And so we're here for each other. You know, some of us have good days, some of us have bad days, but we pray for each other. We really raise one another up. And from that overflow of how we're caring for one another, I think it's actually made us better carers of others. So yeah, it's been an adventure and a roller coaster, but the big challenge has been, God, do you really want us to do this? And we need you to come through. And hey, 6 months on he has, which is really not that long in startup world anyway.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. It's an amazing testimony so far as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. One quick question in all of that. So you sort of integrating psychology and theology. What's the what do you find particularly important about marrying those two up? And what's the danger if you have psychology without theology?
Yeah. I would actually add a third part. I think there's a danger in actually trying to integrate them too.
Okay.
So I thought, I think the fear for people, and I will answer the question that you asked, but I think the fear of the integrated approach is syncretism, which is an old missionary term, which is essentially like if I go to, I don't know, Japan, let's say, as a missionary. It could be any country. This is no hate on the Japanese, by the way. This could be, but let's say I go to Japan as a missionary. What a fail would be is teaching people the gospel as an addition to what they already believe. So, like, kind of your historical worldview plus Jesus. What you want to do is let Jesus reorient everything. And so, in our space, what would be a fail is kind of tokenly tacking Jesus on to what a secular group practice might do. That's what we don't want to do. But at the same time, we tread this fine line because we want to offer, in fact, we have to offer evidence-based services, particularly for our psychologists, in order to claim Medicare. And to use a Christian phrase, we don't want to cross our fingers in paying taxes to Caesar. We want to genuinely do that in a way that honors our government. And so it's been like, how do we do all of this well? And the great answer has been, it's been easier than we thought, in the sense that a client-informed approach is very, very important, which basically means if somebody already has faith, at our intake, they can say, faith is important to me, and therefore our practitioners can integrate that. I think in terms of if it's done well, which I hope that we're doing, I asked our clinical director, like, what is it about psychology that feels like it lends itself to the gospel as opposed to, let's say, if we're offering a general practice service, And I think he hit the nail on the head that he said that psychology involves belief. And he means that generally, not just if you're a Christian. Like, your own framework of who you are, so identity, if we use Christian language, is really important. But also where you are, what story do you find yourself in? Is this world all going to the dogs, or is it being redeemed? Even that question is a huge differentiator in how someone processes their pain. Where is hope found? And so we found that it's, at times you will refer to scripture or, what would this passage say to you in your circumstance? But it often goes even higher than that to our worldview, which is that question of who am I and where's the solution and where's the problem? And while all psychologists are trying to be as objective as they can, the reality is that everyone will come with some level of their own worldview to that practice. And so for someone who is Christian, to have that cohesion, to know that the other person on the other side of the room gets where they're coming from, even though there might be doctrinal differences and that kind of stuff, you share a view of humanity in the world that actually helps you navigate things very meaningfully.
Yeah, brilliant. I really enjoy that perspective. And I think it also speaks into authenticity in the sense of someone not having to compartmentalize themselves or their worldview.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a politician recently and just asking them about their views on how faith interplays with politics and should you keep it separate, and they just laugh. They're like, I mean, it's impossible. You can't, that's obviously what the world wants. They want your Christian view to be outside of it, but it's impossible. If you've been changed by something, if your heart's been reorientated by Jesus, you can't help but engage in that space with a lens that you should believe will bring flourishing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, this is not meant as hate or self-righteousness or whatever, but, our true secular models in that very, how whatever we mean of that, there's an assumption behind that question that a secular view is neutral as well, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everybody's been formed by something. So why not be formed in what you think is God's way?
Yeah. Brilliant. So let's talk about this idea of the greatest commandment. So your subtitle of your book is Recapturing the Centrality of Jesus' Greatest Command. Let's talk about that. Why did you figure that it was an important topic to write about.
Yep.
Jesus has obviously said that's his greatest command. So, I mean, you could just answer it the Bible school way.
Yep.
But yeah, what
And we
led
wouldn't
you?
have a podcast interview.
Yeah, exactly. This would be really boring. And thanks for coming. Yeah. So what inspired you to write it? What was the need that you thought that people really were missing or needed to understand?
Yeah. I think it ended up being grounded in a need, but before it even became a need, it was actually a complex that I had as a preacher.
Okay.
So I was finding that I'd probably been preaching at this point for at least 5 years, somewhere between 5 and 8 years. And I was starting to feel like a bit of a one-trick pony in that I found that almost all of my sermons came back to the concept of love. And I knew the greatest commandments in the back of my head. So it's not like it was a completely foreign or offensive idea, but I was just starting to think, man, like, yeah, I may as well not that ChatGPT existed then, but I may as well be ChatGPTing these sermons because I'm just pushing out the same stuff. And I didn't say that to anybody, but in the back of my mind, I was starting to feel it. And then I came across Matthew chapter 22, and Jesus doesn't just give the greatest command in Matthew's gospel, it's in a few of them.
Yeah.
But in Matthew's gospel specifically, the religious leader asks him which is the greatest command, and he says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and soul and mind and strength, which, by the way, is a conviction behind life to the full, in that Jesus says and not or, and so therefore we are holistic embodied beings.
Brilliant.
And love your neighbor as yourself, which in and of itself is interesting because when I've asked Christians in preparation from this, often they leave off the as yourself bit.
Right.
And that's like a conversation unto itself about, does that mean modern self-care? How do you not be selfish? But so that's Matthew 22, 37 to 39, which is the bit that I knew. But verse 40 floored me when I actually stopped and read it again, because Jesus then says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. And in that moment, I realized, well, the conviction of the book that I hope is true because I've just written it, is that love is not the greatest command because it's more important than all of the others. It's the greatest command because it encompasses all of the others. Paul will say in 1 Corinthians, any gift without love is a resounding gong. The greatest of these gifts is love. There's a number of very all-encompassing statements in Scripture about love that is different from the other commands.
Right.
And so I guess put another way, and it's interesting he's talking to the religious leader, you can have the best theology that you want or the best knowledge, but if you do it without love, then you've missed the whole point. And you can have pretty limited theological frameworks or have only been a Christian a short amount of time, but understand the love ethic and kind of have everything that you need to move forward. And so it was that all of it hangs on these two commands that really grabbed me and made me feel better about my preaching one-trick pony complex that I had, because I thought, maybe Jesus actually would agree with that. And it was kind of from that, and I started to test it, actually.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. I remember one Monday at church, and if you haven't been a pastor, it's very funny. Monday mornings are a bit of a weird feeling because you've been a Christian for some time. You know what Sundays are like. They're a bit of a vibe. And then you walk into church on Monday morning, it's just like dead. It's so weird. And so Monday morning was often rubbish cleaning morning from the church service the night before. And I tell the story in the book, but long story short, someone popped half a cup of coffee in the bin and I didn't know. And I emptied the bin and the bin juice just went all over my white canvas Vans sneakers. And I'm just like, and I'm going to admit I did curse in the church foyer that morning, but I've confessed that. But I remember thinking, if they'd actually acted with love, they would have foreseen this. And the sink was only 2 feet away. All they had to do was tip it in. But I just started testing even a piece of rubbish on the floor in church. If someone had consciously thought, is this a loving thing to do? Because every time I act selfishly, and I'm using a really flippant example to actually show the all-encompassingness of the command. We're not just talking about marriages here. We're talking about leaving a cigarette butt on the ground, right? The implication is if I do this, someone else is going to have to pay the cost and pick this up, or the environment will have to pay the cost. And again, I know it's a small example, but it can range from the smallest to the largest if it's true. And so I just started testing broken situations, if you like, including rubbish bins, and going, if love had been on the forefront of that person's mind, and more introspectively, in certain situations, if love had been on the forefront of my mind, would this outcome have turned out differently? And the answer was always yes. And so that really started the burden for the book, away from a personal journey to a corporate journey of teaching something that God had put on my heart. Because while I don't expect everyone to love perfectly, in fact, I don't think anybody will outside of Jesus, when you imagine a life that is lived with love and everybody is buying into that concept, it's a way better place to be. And I think more specifically within the church, what came out as I was writing it was that love is one of the best antidotes of two things. One is, I guess, a Pharisaical self-righteousness where we know our doctrine really well, but we're not willing to put it into practice. And then the second one is specifically around a tribalism, both within the church and within the world, actually, that I think the secular West is becoming way more tribal. And if you associate with somebody who you disagree with, then you become culpable to them. Actually, I think the church has a really powerful way to say, we don't need to agree nor disagree with you necessarily, but we're going to love you regardless. I think that's one of the greatest third ways the church has in our Western culture to stand out. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why. I mean, in a nutshell, I think the world would be a better place if we loved more. And I think the church needs to recapture its first love more and more. And I think if we do that, then we shine like stars more as how we're meant to.
Yeah. So it's a huge topic. The question that sort of overshadows it for me, I suppose, to create a picture of it is how have you defined love? Because it seems like it's an actionary word, where the examples you're sort of giving, if someone had acted out of love in just considering what they're doing with their coffee cup or their cigarette butt or whatever, it seems like an actionary word. But then I think it's also important for this conversation to define what you're talking about when you talk about love. Are you able to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, if I answer it, they're not going to need to read my book, but that's okay. No, look, you're spot on because, I mean, I frame it, stereotypically around songs. So the way I start the book is talking about that the Beatles said all you need is love, right? And one of the things I say in the book is we love love. Like love is something that, unless you're a real, I don't know, unhinged person, the idea of love is appealing to everybody, whether they're Christian or not.
Yeah.
But the question is, what do we mean by it? I love my dinner and I love my kids, but I also love my car and I love,
Yeah.
my PlayStation. Like, it's such an overused word. And so therefore, what does Jesus mean when he gives the command? What does the Bible mean by love? And I think 1 John chapter 4 became a very, very important cross-reference to this book in that Jesus upholds the centrality of love in Matthew, and the Apostle John defines it in his letter when he says, this is love, not that we loved God, but that God loved us and laid his life down as an atoning sacrifice. Love, if you have to press me on what word do we have in the English language that most encapsulates the most common use of the word love in the Bible, my argument in the book is that it would be service.
Yeah.
So, which is a very, I think, different definition in a sexualized world, for example. I mention it briefly, but I didn't want to make it the sum total of the book. But in the age of like same-sex marriage and plebiscite and love is love, like the love language has become very loaded for a lot of people, and it means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Right.
But I think love is looking at everybody, and again, whether we agree with them or whether we don't, because Jesus says, it's easy to love a friend. Are you willing to love an enemy? Love is looking out at the world and the people within it, of all creeds, backgrounds, orientations, whatever, not necessarily agreeing with all of them, but choosing to serve them. And in fact, serving them maybe precisely because you don't agree with them and you want to show a third way. So what is love in the book, and hopefully what is love in the Bible? It is service.
Yeah. I love that response as well. I think it's challenging, right? If you reframe it in that picture, especially how you mentioned in our culture. When we talk about love, it's self-love, it's very inward focus, it's on how to satisfy your individual needs and how do you identify with things that are going to protect yourself and
Yes.
serve yourself. But then you look to the Bible and it seems almost countercultural in the sense of it doesn't seem so much about like what are we doing for ourselves. But even in that scripture in 1 John, like we love because he first loved us. It's something that's already happened to us. So it's a great place to start. So curious to get your thoughts then. So when Paul talks about I think it's in Galatians and in Romans, he talks about the fulfillment of the law can be fulfilled in the one command, to love your neighbor as yourself. What's your thoughts on that?
Man, that idea of Jesus coming not to abolish the law but to fulfill the law just threw me for so long. And to be honest, I still wouldn't say that I'm an expert or have every defined answer. But if God is love and Jesus is God, therefore in Jesus' perfect love, he fulfills the law. The requirements of the law still stand. We are called to hark back to Deuteronomy 6, to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, and mind. And in the New Testament, expands that to our strength as well. So it's very easy to think functionally. Nobody would probably say this, but maybe they would. Jesus has lived the perfect life, and so therefore I don't need to care about the law. It's like, well, no, actually, the law still stands. But when you fall short of it, which you will, because it's a burden that nobody was able to bear, Jesus has fulfilled that for you. But the pursuit of the law still stands. The pursuit of love still stands, because it is still the best thing that we have in the world for humanity. And Jesus has shown us both. He's done two things. He's shown us the model of it, and thus fulfilling it. And he's also our advocate when we don't fulfill it, which we won't.
Yeah. That's, awesome things to think about. I wonder how different it would look like if we had a community that had come together and had truly experienced the love of God. 'Cause that's sort of what I'm getting is like, well, to be able to love someone else, it has to come from a place. Like we can't just start caring about others out of self-will, or that's very difficult to do. Like I can't just start being like, well, I've got a half full cup of coffee here. I know Chris is going to be cleaning up, but hey, who cares? Like it's in the bin. I've done half my job.
Right.
But if I know that I've been loved and it's like, people actually have put time and effort into the way they treat me, and they've tried to care for me and make things easier in some forms. I don't like the word easier because I think it doesn't connote what I want it to. But it's like, then my response to that should overflow to then think like, how much easier it is to just tip this out and throw it in the bin. And that cares for Chris, who has to potentially open this bin and it's been ripped and there's bin juice everywhere. So I think there's an element in it that we have to experience God's love to be able to love others. How do you talk about that in the book of how people can experience God's love, or how that sort of comes to play or interplays in our everyday lives?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess the Sunday school answer would be, well, God's shown his love on the cross. That's true. I think the reality of the gospel is that we see that spirit of service. How do we experience God's love? It is when we realize, in a very sober, not a self kind of hating way, but in a really sober way, that and they interplay. If Jesus calls me to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength, and I'm emphasizing the word all, we very quickly realize that we've fallen short of it. And I know I'm getting to like core kind of gospel truths, but if God had given up on us for our own imperfection, then we'd all be stuffed, to put it, bluntly. And so I think what you're kind of drawing on is like, who makes the first move? Like, what if I'm going to be the change in my community? And I think the way that kind of culture starts is to realize that my own imperfections are not held against me by God, and therefore, who am I to hold imperfections of others against them? And therefore, even if they haven't served me, I'll make the first move and serve them. And suddenly you have a bit of a self-perpetuating thing. Like, to give an example, my daughter is a teenager now, and we were talking about whether she was going to lead Sunday school next year because she's kind of that age. And I kind of like gently pointed out to her, hopefully without guilt, that like, hey, think about how many Sunday school lessons you've had. Like, hey, who do you think did them? Like, did they get paid? Like, how many hours do you think were involved in that? And it's just like, oh my gosh. And like, kind of the lights start, flicking off. And again, I don't want to guilt or manipulate her into it, but you actually realize that when everybody buys into love, then people actually get loved as well.
Yeah.
And just like you've received it first from God, they've received it from God, you've received it from them. So I think, where does it come from? It dwells in the fact that when we've been loved by God and others, we've received goodness. Like, how much better was our life in whatever specific instance that was? Or if we haven't experienced love, right? How much better would it have been if we had? Like, where does that pain of a lack of love come from? Do I want to perpetuate that with somebody else, or do I want to espouse a different ethic? I think that's what helps us take the first step, I suppose, in our Christian communities. And it becomes, and I know that we're broken and imperfect communities, and I spend a lot of time in my work now with people who've experienced spiritual hurt at the hand of their churches. So that's something I'm very, very acutely aware of in my work. But we also know when it feels good, and we all have a choice at that point to go, do I want to do that for someone else, or do I want to kind of stash that and not pay it forward?
Yeah. What would you say, to a cultural narrative that says, don't do something unless it feels good or it feels right, and the desire, you need to have the desire before you act? Yeah,
it's a great question. I mean, look, it could just be me and I could be a sicko, but I feel really good when I do stuff for other people.
Yeah.
Probably to the point of it almost being addictive. Like, when I stepped out of pastoral ministry, it was really hard not to be the giver. It's like, who am I? So I would say that there probably is, to use psychological language, a bit of a dopamine hit when we've done an act of good service, if you really want to make it about that.
Yeah.
I would also just, I guess, extend the thought experiment and say, like, what would be the end game if everybody just did whatever they wanted? Like, what would that world look like? Like, seriously. And I think we are in an interesting moment in our history, in our modern context, because I think we have kind of stretched the limits of our secular humanist individual ideology to its limits. And people are starting to realize that, hey, how's that going for us? Like, are we more cohesive now? It doesn't look like it. So I think just, playing that experiment out of what if everybody lived that way, I think most people wouldn't really like the answer. And then if you play out the opposite of going, hey, what if everybody served each other? What's that end game? It's like, oh, that would actually be pretty good. Well, which story do you want to find yourself in?
Yeah.
That's what I would say. And then even if you really want to, again, play it on self-centered view, I'd say it feels good to do something nice for other people.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does definitely feel good. I mean, there's truth in the saying it's better to give than to receive.
Yeah.
And then the golden rule, do unto others as you want to be done to yourself.
Yeah.
In all of this, the low-hanging fruit then for me, it's tempting to say, I don't agree with this, but it is tempting to say that, like, it seems like this is possible without Jesus. It seems like, hey, we're going to get a dopamine hit without the religion attached, without the faith attached. So, like, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really It's a good question. You're good at your job, Caleb. You've come a long way in the last 12 months. It's good.
Thank you.
By the way, when a guest says, yeah, it's a really good question, it's them going, crap, how do I answer this? I need like 3 more seconds.
Yeah, give me some more time to formulate a response.
Yeah. And I just stalled again. No, my mind instantly goes to actually the last question you asked, which is, yeah, like everybody can serve people, but into what end goal, into what end story? Like, you know, our doctrine of common grace, if we're familiar with this phrase, says that like non-Christians will still do good in the world, right? So it's not like Christians equal good, non-Christians equal bad. But again, everybody has a worldview and everybody's been formed by something. And so if you don't have Jesus, it would be very easy to play out a story that says, I'm going to serve you. And the way that I'm going to serve you is to encourage you to be the most self-actualized person you can possibly be. And so what one person, like somebody might agree in principle that love equals service, but how do I serve someone? Do I serve them by encouraging them to serve others and keep their eyes fixed on Christ? Or do I serve them by saying, you do you? And is that really service at the end of the day? So I would say that yes, you don't need to be a Christian to love. Absolutely, I would agree with that. But your definition of love is implicitly going to be skewed somewhat from Christ's true definition of love because you've imposed another worldview into what you mean by it.
Yeah, that's great. And then another question that while you're talking that I'd love to get your thoughts on is, what's the importance of the ALL, the all, in the commandments?
Yeah. I think there's 2 really important little words. There's the all and there's the and.
Okay. Explain.
So the and is the holistic part I mentioned, you know, heart and soul and mind and strength. All of your heart and all of your soul and all of your mind and all of your strength. I think there's 2 things to the all. I call this in the book the goal and the gap.
Okay.
So the all language is what we were talking about before about Christ having come to fulfill the law and not abolish it. So the law still stands. You need to love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, all of your strength. It is the virtue that you would be very, very wise to keep your eyes fixed upon for all of your life. So that's the goal part. Love is the goal of life. I say at the start of the book, I'm claiming to have answered the question, what is the meaning of life? And I mean that seriously. And I say it's not because it's my answer, but because I think it's God's answer, right? I'm just pointing to what he's said. So in that way, all is the vision or the goal. The all is also the gap because it implicitly raises the question to the reader, crap, I can't do that. And as the audience in the Sermon on the Mount responds earlier in Matthew's Gospel, who can surpass the righteousness of the Pharisees? And the implicit answer is nobody. And that's the point, because not even the Pharisees can live up to the Pharisees' standards. And so the all language is saying, here's how you should live. And also recognize that you can't. And when you hit that gap, you run to Christ as the one who did.
Great. Another thing, excuse me, that I'd love to, I know you talk about it in your book, and you say it's one of your favorite biblical words, is this idea of shalom. How does that connect into what we're talking about, and why is it one of your favorite words?
Yeah, because I've been to Bible college and I just want to flex. That's why.
Do you have it tattooed somewhere in Hebrew?
Maybe. We can talk about Christian tattoos. That would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, look, I do love the word. Well, first of all, what does it mean? We translate it to peace.
Okay.
It's a good word in that, when I say it's a good word, it's a rich word that I don't think we have a good English word equivalent, because it is so deep and rich, which is why I like to use it in its Hebrew form, not just to theologically flex.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often translate it to peace, but theologians, this is definitely not my original thought. Theologians will say that it's not just peace as an absence of war, as we might use it in common way. You know, we're in times of war, we're in times of peace. That's not quite shalom. I think flourishing is probably the best word. You know, it's used as a greeting in ancient Hebrew culture. You know, shalom, hello, peace be with you, may you flourish. So I think shalom encapsulates the kind of world that we deeply crave that is grounded in love. Like, maybe put another way, shalom is kind of the outflow of what life would look like if we all were committed to the way of love. A way that says, how do I help you? How do you help me? What do you need? What do I need? How do I champion you? You know, how do I help you bind up your wounds? You know, all those kinds of things that says, what would make you a more whole human today than you were yesterday?
Yeah.
And that starts with love, and shalom is the natural fruit of that ethic.
Yeah. That's I do love the word myself as well, because it does have such deep, rich meaning, and it seems to like breathe fullness into what your humanity should look like you said,
I like that.
flourishing.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we've lost in like a Western culture, maybe, that needs to be brought back, is just like, yeah, just how the Jews greet each other, and it's almost like a blessing as well in that sense. Like, you want to see someone flourish. Yeah, it's got so much rich meaning in it.
And again, I love like how holistic it is, particularly in a digital age. Like,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of make it about myself for a moment. Like, I've just found so much joy in gardening, just because it just gets me outside my own head. My whole work Monday to Friday is so digital and
Yeah.
cerebral. It's just nice to use my body sometimes, right? Like, so I love that holistic view of shalom as well, in, I guess, a world of increasing digital or mental exertion. Just reminds us that there is more to our humanity than just that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Do you want to? I don't know. Is there an element of, just with what you're talking about, the sacred and the secular? So in terms of how we love, have you seen something culturally that sort of harms the way we love, in terms of separating? Like you said, we live very cerebral lives. So it seems like there's a disconnect between our wholeness. And then you can even look at the command, like the ands, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and strength. Is there a disconnect the way, like, is that why we struggle to understand how to love people? Because there's this divide within?
I reckon that's part of it. My gut says that's not the root cause.
Right.
I think, like, when I say it's part of it, it is related to digital, but it's not because of digital.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I think what came before digital was individualism. And I think individualism is probably the major worldview identity shift that has harmed our ability to love, that has been perpetuated by digital. And so at some point we decided that what I need is the ultimate good rather than what the collective needs. Not that we were like in heaven before that, but something has happened in recent, you know, let's call it the last 100 years, towards the individual.
Yeah.
And what digital has done has just, I guess, feed that monster, if you like. So my algorithm, my tribe, you know, my Reddit group,
Yeah.
even just the idea of there being a toxic person, you know, like that, those two words put together, it's such an absolute statement to say that that's a toxic person. It's like, well, they're broken and they've, you know, I might want to set some boundaries, but to just blatantly call them toxic is a very...
What does that do? Do you want to... do you want to tease that out a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's self-protective is what it is.
Okay.
Like, if they're toxic, that means I don't have to bother with them, because that would almost be an error on my part. So it actually leaves you in a morally superior position, while also judging them and having to have nothing to do with them.
Right.
Now, granted, like I'm giving exceptions here, and I talk in the book, like I'm not talking about like significantly abusive situations or anything like that. But outside of those extreme examples, I think the moment we write somebody off as not as one of our people, and it doesn't just have to be like emotional toxicity. It's like, I vote left, they vote right. I'm an anti-vaxxer, they're a pro-vaxxer. Like we've compartmentalized our tribes and where we find ourselves. And as I said, not only should I hold to my own convictions, but if I have anything to do with the other person, I'm now lumped into their boat as well by my tribe. You know, so if I'm voting right and I go and befriend a left-leaning, I don't know, whatever, or vice versa, my own tribe starts to reject me. And that's where the individualism, I think, starts to come in, is it's like, well, like I'd better therefore look out for myself, and I'd better construct my own narrative. And slowly we, you know, right voters, and again, I'm using this both ways, hear me clearly, right voters are going, how do we perpetuate our right voting narrative? Not how do we love and serve people on the left who may not see things the same way, but they're still humans. Like, even just to say that, like, I feel like people just laugh at me because it's like, yeah, in what world in 2025 can you visualize that? It's like, it is almost preposterous. And that shows the problem. Like, I think we've become more fractured because we are more individual, and therefore we have the algorithm feed us, and we construct our own algorithm. And the end result of that is that empathy just drops quite drastically.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is the sad state of society, right? Where we can't accept and challenge a person. So it's like we can't love someone and disagree with them.
There you go. Yep.
Instead, you have to love someone. It means merely to support and affirm them.
And that's where I think the church, if it does it right, has a really powerful counter narrative, because the church has done it too. And again, I'll use the lowest hanging fruit, not because I think it's the only one, but just because it's the one probably closest to mine. I think the same-sex marriage debate brought up a lot for people, and it really divided people within the church. And I talk about it quite actively in the book, but whatever your I'll say it because I wrote it in the book, so I'm public with it. Like, I came out of that still upholding a traditional view of marriage. I read as much as I could on both sides of the argument. My lens was, I still believe scripture is authoritative, so I'm going to start with what scripture says or doesn't say. I went through that process. And again, I read what people were saying about scripture as well. And I came away still convinced that traditional view of marriage was God's way. But, and I emphasize the word but in the book, but that's only half the battle, right? That might not even be half the battle. The other half of the battle is, what am I going to do with that?
Right.
And for people in my tribe, to use this tribal language, the self-righteousness that came with that position just was horrible.
Yeah.
And that's like, is that service? Is that really what Christ calls us to? Like, I think love is the intersection of that great tension between truth and grace. It's like, I hold something that I believe to be true, and I'm going to show grace in the midst of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to show grace to people I agree with. I have to show grace to people I disagree with.
Yeah.
The religious leaders say to the disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And the implicit answer is because they're tax collectors and sinners. But in our world, if you see me eating with a tax collector and sinner, it's like, damn, he's gone loose. It's like, no, like, you have your position, but what you do with that position is just as important as the position itself. But we live in a world within the church and within society. It's not just the church that says, my position is everything. It's like, no, it's not. Like, are you going to lord that over people, or are you going to serve them with your convictions?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, if the church can get right and show that to as you said, that love is not to agree and hate is not to disagree, but I'm going to love you whether I agree or I disagree with you because you're an image bearer. That's kind of like, people look at that and go, oh, that's a bit weird. It's like, yeah, it's because I love Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a quote by Tim Keller. I'm sure you've come across it. And it sort of captures that thought really beautifully. He says, God sees us as we are, loves us as we are, and accepts us as we are. But by his grace, he does not leave us where we are. And I think that, like, if we're able to take that grace that we've been shown and that we've experienced into our relationships, into our everyday lives, where we can accept people, but then when it's like you can implore them to push them to Jesus, who is challenging, like the very nature of, like, you can't be a Christian and not be challenged.
Yeah.
If I go to scripture and I read it and I'm like, man, I'm just an awesome person. I'm just nailing everything. I'm so good at loving my wife. I'm so good at spending time with my kids. I think then I'm probably reading it through that individualistic lens.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing Jesus in it call me to a life of flourishing, call me to something more full than I'm experiencing currently. But it's that starting place of, like, well, he he accepts us and sees us as we are, but he doesn't want to leave us there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the trick, and that's the struggle that I have in relationships and in loving my neighbor, is how do I do that well?
Yeah.
How do I go to my neighbor and accept them and love them? Because I am human, I do have biases, I do have like judgments. For me, if someone smells really bad, I'm getting really... I like, there's something in me that it's like, it's hard to love this person. My wife knows that, and it's like, so she's like aware when we're out and there's friends and there's like, I'm just sensitive to smell, but it's wrong of me then to put that higher than someone made in the image of God. So yeah, what's your thoughts on like how we actually then engage with our neighbors when we have our humanity or our flesh that's like pulling us in the opposite direction?
Right. And that's both the encouragement and the challenge of this, all the law and the prophets, right? Because it's like, and I've thought about this in the book, because as a preacher, like I really don't like theoretical only sermons. Like I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Tell me how to do it.
Right. Give me 7 steps, right? Like I am naturally that kind of guy. And so that was a bit of a tension in the book of like, this is so conceptual and so ethereal. How do we make it real? And I chose like 5 core topics at the end of the book to really speak specifically into, which were sexuality, work, family, church, and I've forgotten the 5th off the top of my head. It must have been a memorable one. Oh, and justice. Kind of like, maybe that's your smelly person on the street one that you need to read, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is like, I could have written about anything because that's the whole point of the commandment if it's true. You know, and as dissatisfying as the pragmatist in me is going to feel in giving this answer, I would start by saying to you, when you meet the smelly person, or whatever anybody's version of the smelly person is, what would it look like to serve them? Like, what do they need? And it's not necessarily automatically deodorant. It might actually be dignity, right? Like,
right.
It might be friendship because they stink and nobody else wants to be friends with them. Like, seriously, like that's what Jesus did with lepers, right? Like nobody else wanted to associate with them. So I think there is a pragmatic level that says I must give them deodorant, or I must buy them lunch, or I must invite them to my house. But there is a step before that that says, if love is service, how do I serve them?
Yeah.
And I think that question starts to tap a little bit into the whole, I've talked about the truth-grace tension. I think it's also the word-deed tension. Like, is love to evangelize them, or is it just to show them acts of mercy? It's like, well, it's both.
Yeah.
Like, how can I love somebody and not tell them about the gospel, but I'm also not just going to beat them over the head with it, because that's not really meeting them with where they're at either. Like, I find love very satisfyingly holistic in that way too.
Yeah.
And it does require a measure of EQ where we read the room and read the person, but that's also part of love, right? Like, love is not a formula where, you know, I'll give you a 3-week course in how to love better. Like, I can give you principles, but you're going to need to adapt them to your version of the smelly person.
Right.
And but it starts with the question of, how do I serve them? And if that's, you know, if I had to get anything or any hope from writing this book, if I can have more Christians asking themselves that question every day, how do I serve today? When I say I don't care what else comes next, I guess what I mean is I can't engineer what's next because everyone's circumstances will be different. I've given prompts and ideas, as I said, in key areas of life. But if you can wake up with that lens, because I think that's what it is. Jesus gives us a lens to view everything through, which means I'm not a Democrat or a Republican or an anti-vaxxer or an Anglican or a complementarian or what. I'm a disciple of Jesus, and my job here is to love, and to love is to serve. So how can I do that today? And I'm convinced that the more of us in the church who can lead with that question, the better the world will be and the better our light will shine.
That's brilliant. I love that response. Here's a question sort of on the other side. So say you're in a place where you've enslaved or you've experienced some real injustice in your life. There's so many different kinds, whether it's abuse or even you're battling through mental health, whatever it may be. What does it look like to serve when you're in that place, or is that something you should be thinking about?
Yeah. Yes, if what I'm saying is true in the book, even if you're being, to use your examples, even if you're in an abusive situation or you're in the midst of mental illness, if what I'm saying is true, I have to, in all integrity, say yes. We still wake up in the morning and ask, how do I serve? Now, where it gets very complicated and nuanced is, well, what does it look like to serve in each of those situations? So if I use the two examples you've given, and I'll start with the mental illness example, which I think is different in its implications from the abuse example. And I've had to live this. This was my first book. You know, I would say if you're in the midst of a deep depression or anxiety, your love, the first command is always to love God, right? And so I think one of the most powerful metaphors, although it's more than a metaphor, parables maybe would be a better word, that we have in the Bible is the widow and the two coins. So while yes, it's about money, it's also about the heart. And what that, I think, moment in Scripture shows is Jesus is less concerned with the volume of output and more concerned with what you've brought proportional to what you have. And so I would say that, and I'm speaking from experience, you know, I've been in a psychiatric hospital, right? And even in that moment when I had the least to give, and I didn't do it perfectly, but even just asking somebody else how they're going, another patient in the hospital, right? That's an act of service. And lo and behold, you meet people who are like, kind of like you, that are kind of in inverted commas, relatively normal, but have been going through stuff that's really, like I met lawyers and doctors, and you just find like, oh, wow, like these people need love. And while I had to see my core purpose of that hospital stay was to get better so I could love my family, there was still work that I could do in there, even though it wasn't spectacular or seen. So I would say, actually, if you're in the midst of a mental illness, you might not be able to do as much in an absolute sense, but actually serving and finding dignity in that in the little ways that you can. God sees it first and foremost, as he did with the widow and the two coins. And I would also say it gives you a sense of purpose that unlocks some of the depth of despair that you're feeling. So I guess a shorter way of saying that is try not to judge yourself relative to your normal output. You can still serve. It just might not be in the same quantity. But again, the widow and the two coins would say God sees that and he's totally cool with that.
Yeah.
About the abusive relationship, I mean, that really is the elephant in the room question in this love. If love is service, what does that mean in the context of abuse? Because that's probably where it's been most misinterpreted or misapplied in the church.
Yeah.
And at Life to the Full, I work with a great colleague called Monica Cook, who's a sexologist, a Christian lady. And we've actually had a separate podcast episode on dead elephants about how her and I have massively different feelings about the word service. Because for me, I'm like espousing it as the purpose of life, and she's going, that word has probably caused the single most hurt in people who triggers, I see coming through my rooms, right? And Monica and I have talked about that a lot. You know, sometimes, in fact, dare I say always in situations of abuse, the best way you can serve your abuser is not necessarily to let them keep abusing you, because that's not a flourishing life for them either. The best way that you can serve them and to love them is to point out their sin ultimately and call them towards a better way, not just for you, but for them as well. You know, they're not living flourishing lives in that existence either. It might have started looking like somewhat tempting, but that reveals some sort of darkness and pain within them, and they're not exercising their full humanity. And so service does not have to mean opening yourself up for more abuse. It might be, to use a different example in Scripture, like with someone who's caught in sin in the church, the greatest love you can actually do is to hand them over to Satan so that they might return, right? So I think love is, because it would be easy to, I think the world's logic would say, hand them over to Satan so that they can burn.
Right.
Right? The Christian ethic of love is hand them over to Satan so that they will see the error of their ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between Christian love in that kind of context, whether it's abuse or whatever that we see in the church where someone is acting really improperly, it's like point it out, hand them over to the consequences of what they're doing, and see if they realize what the pain is for others and for themselves, because ultimately that's how they're going to unlock their flourishing too. And that doesn't necessarily mean you re-enter into that relationship, but you've actually helped them. Whether they take you up or not is another matter. That's out of your hands. But you've actually given them an opportunity to reconsider their ways so that they can find a new path forward in their journey too.
Yeah. That's a brilliant answer. I think it sort of feeds into that Christian narrative that we're called to accept and challenge, not support and affirm. It's not the love doesn't mean, or service doesn't mean just allowing someone to continue to do something, whether it's harmful to yourself or harmful to them. But it actually means to challenge it, and what challenge may look like. It may be confrontation, but then it also may be finding help externally, and bringing in external help. So I love what you're saying there, Chris.
And bringing in external help is so different from, man, they've done so bad to me, I'm going to do so bad to them. Like that's the difference. I don't have to keep taking this crap, and I can help them try to find a different path forward. Again, because whatever that is leading to that abuse shows that, there is some sort of darkness within their own psyche, that they've got some sort of wound that's behind that as well.
Yeah. And then it also speaks into that idea that we're not called to be their savior.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to either stay in that situation or try and change them, but we can bring external help into it, and sort of wash our hands clean of it.
Yeah. And I think it taps into the as yourself as well. Like, hey, what's happening to me? Would I want that for someone else?
Brilliant.
Does God want that for me? Like, no. Like, I don't. Yeah, love is not a doormat. It's serving. And sometimes serving means saying some hard things with the right motives.
Yeah, brilliant. Before, I've got one more question that I'd love to ask you. It's something I've been doing with our guests over the past, 20 or so episodes, but I'll ask our previous guest a question for our next guest.
Oh, cool.
And then I'll sort of pass on the favor. So I'll do that with you in a second. But before I do, is there anything in this conversation, Chris, that you thought we didn't get into, but you think it's important that we just answer a question that I haven't asked?
Something I've been reflecting on a lot, and this is not just a word for married people, this is a word for all of us. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, and one of those specific chapters in section 3 is about love in the context of family. And again, I'm broadening that to, not just mums and dads and kids, but, uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever. I think one of the things that's happened culturally in Christian circles, where it seems to me that more of our movements are happening in a ground up kind of way, I think God is teaching us something in that even if I don't have super huge influence on the world, what I do have is the influence in my family. And again, this question of what would it look like for everybody to serve? If I play that thought experiment, and I preach this to myself all of the time because I have a massive Messiah complex, right? Like, I write books. Like, you only write books if you believe you've got something important to say for the world. Seriously, right? Like, so I've got to guard my heart in that all the time. Is leaving a legacy of love for my wife and 4 kids a good enough legacy for me, or for my cousins, or for my parents? The human capitalist in me says, no, that's not good enough. But family, the more I reflect on it, is God's design for a scalable micro ecosystems with which the world could change. And, in our rooms, like at Life to the Full, it's not always the thing that people come to us, but family wounds is certainly a big one. And so I think about the legacy of omission a lot. Like, what if my legacy of love is that my kids won't experience pain? Like, they'll never know that, right? They'll never know that they haven't experienced trauma, or they might see it in other people, but it's almost an invisible thing.
Yeah.
And so, and the beauty, of course, of being a Christian is that family language is extended into the church, and the call to be brothers and sisters is a really high call. So I guess that's all to say that in this pursuit of love, maybe test it out with your family first, because I say in the book, family is where you can't hide.
Brilliant.
Like, there's no filter on family. Like, they'll see the true you one way or another. So maybe try with them first because they're in your proximity. And if you're leading out of an abundance there, maybe then you can go out into the world. But don't do it for flashy reasons and platform if you're not doing it at home.
Yeah. That's brilliant. I don't have anything to add to that. I love that. That's if we can just take that and go, it gives you a starting point, and such a significant starting point as well. Brilliant.
Because it's the easiest and the hardest all at once.
100%. It's so much easier to love a stranger that you don't know. But yeah, I love what you're saying. Start with your family. Start with your siblings or your parents or your wife or your husband, or a close friend. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for that. So the question, I previously had a conversation with the former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, John Anderson.
Wow.
And his question was, do you take the time to be an available sounding board to young people or a mentor? And if not, why not?
Whoa. Thanks a lot, John Anderson. I'd like to think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes. It's funny. The first thing that comes to mind is my official role as a pastor has always been in a morning congregation that's very kind of family heavy.
Right.
So it's kind of a lot of ministry to kids and their parents. And so the young person, let's call them, and I don't know what John Anderson had in his mind when he said young, but let's say 18 to 25-year-old perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm so glad he asked me that question because I can give an answer that makes me look good. I've actually always enjoyed that space, even though it wasn't formally in my job description, because it just feels like what I really love about mentoring is people are so hungry and they're so formative. And again, we've talked about kind of worldview and being formed multiple times in this conversation. They are going to be formed into something.
Yeah.
And maybe because I have been a pastor of older people as well, like at that age, you're in a lot of curative mode. It's nice to get into the preventative mode sometimes. And I think particularly in that, let's call it 18 to 25 range, or post-school to kind of not necessarily pre-work, but pre-really serious career trajectory.
Yeah.
That's a really exciting space to impart some wisdom of some things you've learned that are often from your own mistakes. I think that we live in a world that has diminished the sage role in society, but I think the sage has a huge amount to bring for the young person, and the young person has a huge way to serve the sage in showing them the dignity that, hey, you might not be the king of the castle anymore, but I'm sure you've learned some things along the way. So, and my experience, I don't know about yours, Caleb, but like within the church, I think young people are more hungry than ever for that in their life, because there is a lot of rudderlessness that is being felt, and people want stability and longevity in that life. And so, so to answer John Anderson's question, do I? Yes. And so therefore, why do I not? Well, that's a redundant question that I don't have to defend myself on.
Brilliant. I love that. I agree with he is advocating for the importance of it as well, just like we're talking about with worldview and identity. If we're wanting to see meaningful relationships and meaningful societal structures built, then we really need to invest meaningfully into mentorship and into young people. And I think, there's something to say. I think there's an eagerness and a desire for young people. I definitely had that. I think where people see giftedness and talent and want to just pursue that, I think young people are switched on to be like, no, like you're just seeing me for what I can do.
Yes.
And I think if we're able to engage, and it goes back to that human dignity, right?
Right.
Strip away what you do. You're loved for who you are.
Yep.
If we're able to engage people for who they are and young people for who they are, then the meaning comes from relationship. It doesn't come from you're going to excel or you're going to do this. I think those are like secondary things that do come along. But it means so much to people who are maturing to be like, this person's really invested in me.
Yep.
And it wasn't because they wanted to like see me on stage or see me do this podcast or whatever. Like those are all great if that happens, but it's like they genuinely liked me.
Yeah.
And I could genuinely be vulnerable and raw and honest with them. And it didn't concern them. They just knew that what they had to say would bring flourishing to my life.
Yep.
So I think there's that trust relationship that's built there. Love what you're saying. So what would your question then be for our next guest? What do you think would... It doesn't have to be serious, but I usually say, like, what do you think would cultivate a meaningful conversation? Yeah.
Wow. Gee, my mind is racing on so many things, but I guess, it's a bit risky because I might expose them as not having my answer, but I might say, how would you define love?
How
about
would you
that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you have a follow-up question to that definition?
Why do you think that would make the world a better place? Whatever their answer is, how would the world be better for that thing?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for the time and just your thoughts and insights, Chris. I really enjoy that it comes from a place of experience. And then more than that, obviously experience is a huge thing, but it comes from a place of you've wrestled with these things with Scripture and with God, which is so good. Scripture is the ultimate authority, and it brings so much life. And if we can see the worldview, see our world through a gospel lens, it can really change things, but it takes wrestling with. And I thank you that you've done the hard work in that area. If people are wanting to find out more about yourself, the work that you do, or even grab a copy of your book, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, I think the book, I'll have to double check this. I think it's coming out, tomorrow at the time of recording. So by the time this is published, it should be out. So it's published by the Good Book Company. So you can have a look on their website. It'll be on Amazon, Kurong, wherever you would buy a normal Christian book, it'll be there. It'll be on Kindle and actually Audible. So I got to record this one as an audiobook.
Brilliant.
And it's my voice, which was super cool. Apologies if it tails off at the end. I recorded it all in one hit over one day. So I might have been flagging by the end of it.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So you can get it there. And then the work I do a bunch of speaking around the country and increasingly the world as well, which is really awesome. So ChrisCipollone.com is where you can find out about me as a speaker. The website is just being updated as we speak, so you might see the new version by the time you hear this interview. And then Life to the Full, please check us out, lifetothefull.com.au. We are nationwide, so one of the reasons why this was a good time to start this work is with telehealth. Just like you and I are on other sides of the country, talk-based therapy is really, really effective online as well as in person. And so wherever you are in Australia, check out our website because we are available nationwide. And I would just say what I always say when I talk about this ministry, that is it possible that our deepest formation happens when life is difficult and not always easy? And so we really want to be there for people, helping form them more in the way of Jesus, hand in hand with God, to not diminish their struggle, but actually to acknowledge it and step into it, but doing so with hope of the love of God. So check out Life to the Full. And we really hope to use this language of this interview, serve you and love you through the professional services that we're able to offer.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Chris.
Thanks, Caleb.